Welcome to Centre Court with thanks to OMF. Kick back and relax with an adjustable bed from Australian designed and owned OMF. Watch sport your way. And of course, Cobram Estate, Australia's most awarded extra virgin olive oil, grown, harvested and first cold pressed in northern Victoria. I'm Bianca Chatfield and Maddie Brown is joining me on Centre Court. Excuse my voice, it's very croaky. On the weekend I was off sick and here I am, it's slowly coming back before the weekend.
There's too much netball to be had, too many things to talk about.
Watching too much TV, that's for sure. It was a big round 7. Let's get into the OMF overview, watch sport your way. And it all started off in Queensland.
It did be, it was the Battle of the Bruce, but Lightning way too strong for the Firebirds in the end. They seem to be starting to find their straps, which is dangerous territory for the rest of the competition. Thunderbirds, wow, what a score they put on against the Swifts. Swifts, lowest score in SSN history. 13 in the first quarter, 13 entirely in the second half.
That is unbelievable, isn't it?
Unbelievable stuff. Giants back on the winning bandwagon, +7. They had obviously an induction of Maddie Hay into this team, and I'll talk about her a little bit later. And then Vixens, wow, what a win over there in the West. That is such a cauldron RAC arena to get a win under. 11,000, biggest home and away crowd. So huge win for the Vixens against the Fever, and that's the first loss for the Fever for the season.
And that is the first half of the season. Look at the ladder as it stands. Fever and Vixens both sitting up the top. And if we turn our attention to the bottom of the ladder, the Firebirds really struggling to find that next win. They started off strong, but they haven't gone well towards the middle of the season.
No, and it's really looking at that ladder, we're kind of seeing that top 3 really dominate. That middle maybe 3 can maybe tinker and hopefully secure a top 4 spot. And the bottom 2, Giants and Firebirds, are they in a bit of a rebuild or building phase for both of those teams? I guess, you know, the second half will soon tell.
We shall see. Well, that was the OMF overview. Kick back and relax with an adjustable bed from Australian design and owned OMF. Watch sport your way. Now it's time for the good oil, all thanks to Cobram Estate, Australian extra and virgin olive oil. Joining us for the first time this season is SEN netball commentator Georgia Rajic. Georgia, welcome. You've got a bit to talk about and it all starts with the Swifts.
I guess they're the big talking point of the round this at the moment because they posted the lowest ever score in their history, going all the way back to 1997. The last time we saw a score this low was 2014, when the Thunderbirds only put 26 goals in a 60-minute game of netball. So it's really hard to move past what on earth is happening with them this season. Obviously, the injury to Maddie Proud has affected them more so than we would have thought, but to win by 24 one week and then to lose by a similar amount the next week, that is a massive, massive turnaround.
And when you look at the Swifts, we know they're a really proud club. They can turn things around quickly. Can you see that happening for them?
I think it really depends on how long Maddie Proud is going to be out with injury.
Do we know? Does anyone know how long is she out for?
No, this is where we ask for this transparency. I'd love to know, Bianca, is it 4, is it 6 weeks? I don't know that one player can make that big a difference though.
Absolutely not, but I think the other issue is where are they going to find the goals? They had 4 different options in the shooting circle, but Helen Housby didn't even didn't get a single goal in the final quarter. 2 attempts in 5 minutes. It's just not the Swifts we've come to expect, who have always been at the top of the ladder consistently at the end of every season. Is this them breaking away from the pack for the first time in a couple of years?
Well, I guess at the start, as you said, they were definitely premiership contenders. They had that combination of, all of these players coming back. We had Sam Wallace-Joseph coming back into the mix. But do you think it was their defence that let them down on the weekend, or attack? Because, the attack were against the best defensive unit in the Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
Like, hard to score against them at the best of times, but not 13 and a half.
And especially when you consider that Lily Gorman-Brown did so well in centre, and then as soon as she went against the player of the match, and LaTanya Wilson, didn't have the same impact. But look, talking specifically about the defence, the penalties that they racked out,
they're massive.
They're one of the most penalised sides in the competition, consistently week in, week out. And you look at exactly what Maddie Turner and Sarah Clow, how many penalties are racking up. For 4 gains to Maddie Turner, 14 contacts and 5 obstructions. That is not a good ratio in the slightest.
No. Girl maths doesn't add up for me on that one.
No, and they had 80 penalties as a team and 42 of those were Clow and Turner. What can they do? Because every week they're racking up these high numbers.
I wonder if it's a going into the defensive thing, trying to actually pull out the opportunity to allow a little bit more space. But my question is, every contact isn't equal. We saw the sending off of Jamie Lee Price last week. Are we going to start seeing potential send-offs when players rack up this many penalties consistently, specifically contact penalties?
Do you think that there should be more clarity from the umpires? Should it be a measurable thing? If you rack up 15, then you're on a warning, and then from there on? Thoughts?
I think so, but I think it also comes down to not every penalty is equal. Some penalties definitely deserve a bit more of a talking to than others. I mean, Ali Smith was involved in the Jamie Lee Price suspension last week, and this week she, was a talking point again, given the contact on Laura Sherian. Both players going for the ball fairly, but then she almost flung Laura Sherian across the court. We saw that call advance, but how does that kind of look in the full term of the season? Does that mean we actually need to be more consistent in the ruling and provide a little bit more support to the umpires?
Now, as an avid watcher of netball, do you think we should see more suspensions?
I think it's really interesting in like Suncorp Super Netball compared to the other leagues across the world, especially New Zealand and England, how many more suspensions they're having week in, week out compared to us. And Australians are known for a very physical style of game. So I think it's really interesting that there aren't as many suspensions that we're seeing in the Super Netball this season. I personally love a bit of chaos. So I'm bring it on. But I think that's one of the interesting things, that we're seeing it consistently applied at this elite level, and they're being sending off in New Zealand and in England, but we've only seen one so far.
Let's go back to those penalties, because they have brought in a very distinguished coach in Dame Nolene Karua. Do you reckon maybe going into a New Zealand zone type of defence might be the option for them to try and be in the contest, build the pressure, but not be known to the umpires and out of play all the time?
Potentially, if it's getting them off the body and getting away from those contacts that we're seeing so detrimental to them in the attack, in the defensive third, then potentially that is the option moving forward for them. But I think it's really interesting considering the teams that they have coming up as well. They've got Mavericks on Sunday. What is that going to mean for them? Are they going to try and put in a new style, get away with these a little bit less contacts moving forward, or are they going to stick to the game plan? We see so many rotations for the Swifts. Every player made their way onto the court this weekend. Are we going to see less rotation potentially, and just try and get that starting seven to grind out the 60 minutes? There's a lot of questions to come from that.
Oh, it's very exciting to watch what happens from here. Thanks so much for joining us. That was The Good Oil, thanks to Cobram Estate, Australia's most awarded extra virgin olive oil, grown, harvested and first cold pressed in northern Victoria. It is now time for Maddie's Minute. Maddie, take it away.
Well, I want to talk about what we've learned so far halfway through the season, and maybe manifest some questions that I want answered by the end. So I'm going to see whether I can get through this in our minute, but let's look at the bottom. Let's look at Mavs and Firebirds. Mavs definitely building, obviously, a club from scratch. Can they work their way up, or at least get some consecutive wins in a row to establish themselves and be able to push on for the next season? Because I'm not sure they're obviously going to contend in that top four at the start. Firebirds' second year in a rebuild phase. They'll want to be in better shape finishing the season than they were. So I want to know, what can they actually kind of build on they've got at the moment? Giants, is Maddie Hay the answer to all their prayers? She obviously came back on the weekend, and you could see the confidence that the attack end played with. Lightning, they're winning without Bruce, but where do they stand once she comes back? Because I think they're about to go boom in this second half of the season. And Vixens, have they just shown the blueprint to beating the Fever? And then on the rotation side of things for Swifts and Fever, have they started to rotate too much that they don't have that spine and stability within their list, that now they've got more questions going, who do we put on in different moments? Because they've been trying to get everyone on, still win. Do you actually know what each player can do in those moments? Because I think now's the time to knuckle down and really not only win games, but stamp your authority on the competition.
Oh, I love it, Mads. And you know what? We can revisit this at the end of the season and give teams little ticks.
I'll try and manifest some of these things, but yeah, it would be great to see some of these teams obviously finish off strong.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into our round preview. It is round 8, which I cannot believe. And we'll start by looking at the first game that we think is a standout. Obviously, the Vixens and the Giants play first, then the Lightning and Fever, Firebirds, Thunderbirds, and then Mavericks and the Swifts. But I want to focus in on that second game, Lightning and Fever.
Oh, I mean, Lightning, as you look, they lost the first 3. They've won, obviously, the last 2. But I think they've just started to gel. They're just starting to find their feet. That attack end starting to, really get into connections. The defence end, Ash Irvin, she's like just come out of nowhere, getting so many gains, even with Tara Hinchcliffe. So a young defensive line, which we probably thought weren't going to get many turnovers, are actually bringing in lots of opportunities for their attack end, and their experience down the attack end were probably slow to kind of combine, and now all of a sudden starting to find their groove. And yeah, I think this is a danger game for the Fever, because they'll already have questions about last weekend's game. They've got to go across. It's a big travel day for them. Can they win, or is it another cross to the Fever?
And the other game I think we should highlight, that is the Mavericks and the Swifts. How will the Swifts rebound from that shocking loss last weekend? For the Mavericks too, this is a game they can win if they play their cards right. For me, they muck around with the ball far too much across that attack transverse line. Nankivell, is she the answer at wing attack? Is it Fraser? I feel like they're chopping and changing a little bit too much. Cardwell, they go a lot through the back on their centre pass to help Cardwell out, but they rely too much on that to work, and then they have to put in long balls to Jock all the time. Clow will be all over that if she's sitting back in keeper.
Yep.
I'm fascinated to see how this one plays out. I really think the Mavericks can get it done.
First home win.
Yes, they need to get it done. They've been waiting for this first home win. They can do it, but they've got to start off very well.
I totally agree with you. From watching them on the weekend, part of me thinks it's Cardwell who is out the front a lot. I'd love to see her in the circle. Where is she most dominant? When she's in the circle, they deliver the ball to her, and she can shoot from anywhere. So maybe starting at the top of the circle, not so much out of it, but just making sure Clow is having to be busy, and it might even isolate Jock a little bit more. So get in the circle, allow the middies that front line to have the space to work to the circle edge, and then she can punch up the middle rather than being caught up too high and, as you said, struggling to get over the transverse line. But they have got the game plan. It's just about executing it for a longer period of time.
The Mavericks defenders, I believe, now are finding their right form. Kim Jenner, less penalties, more gains to her name. She's going to really take it up to Helen Houseby. That's going to be a matchup you don't want to miss. All right, let's get into our social scoop. Now, this week, we have a question from Gary Patrick Brown on X. Now, Gary says, now I'm going to put this to you, Maddie. Is Taylor Williams the best defensive centre in the SSN? Obviously, Diamond's call-up will be tough for her, but at the moment, the season so far, is she?
You know what, you look on stats alone and she's definitely up there. I think the one thing, for Taylor is, how is she feeding? What is her efficiency? Is she just only a centre? We've seen a lot of the Diamonds, yes, they do go with kind of like those standalone positions. You've got to be really strong in a dominant one. But, a Kate Maloney, she was mainly a wing defence and has shown that she's got capabilities in centre and wing defence. Jamie Lee Price, we see you've got to have a few more positions to your bow. And I think that's probably the one thing for Taylor Williams, although she's very effective in that defensive unit with the Jamaicans and Matilda Garrett. I just think she's a bit too standalone in centre, so would need to obviously bring in a different position to her game if she is going to be considered for the Diamonds. But then, I could also flip it around and say her combination with Georgie Horgis. Is that a combination for the future? As I said, so many questions that we could have answered, but yes, she's very good, but no, I don't know that she's the best defensive centre. I actually probably think Jamie Lee Price is up there. She gets so much gained ball and she is so dominant in feeding, where Taylor, we see Georgie Horgis do a lot of the ball handling.
Well, thank you so much for your question, Gary. Make sure you send in any of your questions for next week's show. I promise I'll have more of a voice to talk about it with you. And that is our show for this week. Thank you to OMF, Watch Sport Your Way, and Cobram Estate, Australian Extra Virgin Olive Oil. I'm going home to rest, Maddie, and I will see you at the games this weekend.